Hello, and welcome to the Big5D podcast. I'm Charles Laughlin, editor-in-chief of BigFive Digital. I'm joined by Thaheer Mullins. Thaheer, how are you?
Hi, Charles. Good. It's great to be here. Lovely to be talking to you today.
Good. We're happy to have you. So you are with Savant Venture Fund. Tell me at any point if I'm framing anything incorrectly in terms of your title, name of your organization, anything like that. So you're an investor, to put it straightforwardly, and you're going to be a participant in our upcoming BigFive Summit, which we're very grateful for. Thank you. And what you're going to be doing is organizing a group of startups and running a panel discussion around fourth industrial revolution, fourth IR. So I thought it would be interesting to have you on before the show to talk about what that is and why
Sure.
it's so important. So let's start at the beginning. Like I'm a 5-year-old with only a couple of minutes, explain what fourth IR is.
Okay. So before we just do that, I just want to sort of say Savant is a deep tech science and engineering firm. We're a VC and an incubator, been around for about 20 years as an incubator, enterprise support organization, startup advisor, with specifically looking at science and engineering type businesses. And for the last 5 years, we've been a VC, having deployed our first fund.
Right.
So fourth industrial revolution. Let's get to it very briefly. There's been a series of revolutions. These are technological sort of innovations that just really change the way industry functions, and then that has a sort of knock-on event of how your economy transforms, how labor participates, how the fourth industrial revolution has really changed a little bit more than just that, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the first industrial revolution, steam, water, mechanical production equipment, that's where it starts, right? And that enables a lot more efficiencies. It allows for better production. It allows for people to now move via locomotives and those things.
Right.
Then you start getting towards sort of division of labor. This is the second industrial revolution with electricity and mass production, and that then is another catalyst, right? And then after that, you get sort of like to the early 60s or late 60s rather, early 70s. Then you get your third industrial revolution. Some will say it started in the 50s. Hey, we all have access to the internet now, and that's really everything that encompasses electronics, IT, automated production. People start talking about Moore's law. So you fast forward to today, and everybody's talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And what is that? What does it mean? And it means a lot of different things to different people, because if you look back at any of these revolutions, people didn't know that they were revolutions or know to call them the fourth, the first, the third, or whatever until
Right. That's
they
more of
had
a
been passed.
hindsight thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's more of an
yeah.
in hindsight thing. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So people are sort of looking at things now and saying, what what is the fourth industrial revolution now? Nowadays, it encompasses AI and computer vision and all these things. And people were doing computer vision and AI at the beginning of this century,
Right.
in the early 2000s, but people didn't quite say this is the fourth industrial revolution.
Right.
But it is today.
Right.
It's so it's come to be anything, the Internet of Things, AI, machine vision, robotics. It's, for me, what it really boils down to is the blurring of the digital and physical realm. So where we exist now versus what we're doing online, and the interconnectedness of that. I think for me, that is what the fourth industrial revolution actually is. And it's not just manufacturing,
Mm-hmm.
it goes everywhere to consumer technology. So it impacts the way we interact with the world around us, with each other, even, over
Mm-hmm.
long distances. And then how we make our purchase decisions, and
Right.
how goods and products get to be produced, how they are actually managed as you get to that purchase decision as well, and then how
Mm-hmm.
they are manufactured, how they are sourced. All of these things are now just being connected through technology. And so the fourth industrial revolution for me isn't just about industry, it's about everything else in between and beyond.
Okay. Okay. So a couple of things there. So is it fair to say this is the first industrial revolution we talk about while it's still going on?
Say
I mean,
what?
these previous, is this, I'm sorry, is this the first
Okay.
industrial revolution that we're talking about while it is still happening? Right. Because I'm sorry.
No, no, that's a fair question. I wish I
Mhm.
was around back
I
then
didn't know
to
if you
be
were
able
talking
to.
about, yeah, the first industrial revolution while it was happening. Fair point. Fair point.
So I think when
Oh, okay.
the first happened and the second
Mhm.
happened, people probably didn't speak about it as much. But
Yeah, of course.
if you look at if you look at the third industrial revolution, I imagine that there would have been that because access to information, access to education is really picking up as a part
Hmm.
of that revolution. So you have a lot of there's a lot more academia going around as well. So the essence of like where does fourth industrial revolution come from? I think it comes from some academic text where somebody said and they somebody said and said looked back and said this characterized this phase, this characterized that phase.
Hmm.
It's the current phase is a little bit different than the phase before. Therefore, we'll call it a new phase. So that's my interpretation of how things play out. Even today, and the fourth industrial revolution, I don't think today is even being defined as much by academics as it
Hmm.
is people actively involved in the industry. You've got VCs defining what it is. You've got startups defining what it is. You've got big corporations defining what it is. So for me, it's
Okay.
there's no
Okay.
owner to the title, but it's definitely interesting to see so many players identifying and sort of defining what it is as we're going through it, and watching it
Okay.
evolve as
Okay.
well.
Okay. So let me put it this way: if a startup comes to you seeking investment, wants to review their pitch deck with you or whatever your process is for reviewing a company that approaches you, and they say we're a fourth IR startup. I don't know if they say that, but let's say they do.
Mm.
If they were to say that, what does that mean to you, or what do you think it means to you? What kind of company do you think you're about to look at?
Um, if somebody says that to me, I sort of think, so what? Because there's so many.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
so what startups tend to do is they tend to say uh, these are the drivers of growth in the first industrial revolution, second,
Hmm.
third, and then they'll come to the fourth, and then they'll sort of say why in the fourth industrial revolution their particular offering has found a sound footing, right?
Hmm.
And then as a result of that, you know, they'll carry on with their pitch. To define a single business as playing within 4IR for me is it doesn't work because it's if these days if you've got a physical technology
Hmm.
aspect to it to your business, if there's no IoT component to it, it's very hard for us to really assess the real opportunity there, because these days the connectedness of devices and technologies is one of the primary drivers of value. How
Hmm.
well you can control your machinery, how well you can control the inputs and the outputs, and what kind of usage data you get from that gives you insight into your customer behavior, so you can augment
Hmm.
and create new layers of concentric value so that you can um, really bolster and entrench yourself within your customer base. So for me, with a with a startup founder says, "Hey, I'm a 4IR founder," I'm like, "Okay, I understand."
Does
So there's
anyone
going to
say
be
that? I mean, that sounds like sort of
n-
a cringy thing to say, but but you
you'll
invest in
be
companies that you
surprised.
think of as 4IR, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
okay, so when let's just turn that around. When you look at one company in your portfolio and you say that's a 4IR startup, what is the common feature to that startup that makes
Common
you say
feature,
that?
I would say, is that there's a physical. asset or a physical product that's on the
Hmm.
ground
Yeah.
that is connected or monitored using some of the latest technologies uh, to be an interface between what's happening on the ground and what's happening at the computation layer, which is either in the cloud or on premise
Hmm.
or wherever it is. So some
Hmm.
people might have uh, AI or some level of connected firmware embedded into the products or assets that they put out and that they offer. And for me,
Hmm.
that is how I would just characterize it. Is it a connected technology basically? Is it a connected
Okay.
solution or connected offering?
Okay. Okay.
So it's
So,
got to have a tie.
well,
Sorry, it's got to have a tie back to the physical world.
okay. And then the an important feature, at least, of that connectedness is the data
Yeah.
that can be seen essentially in real time, right? And talk about why that is such an important driver of this, if that's the right question.
It's an important driver because I mean, people are building businesses around data.
Yeah.
As an example, you go to a utilities provider,
Hmm.
they are using data generated on the ground to determine how much they are going to bill you every month.
Right.
So if there's no data, they got to do estimates and what you
Right.
call it, reconcile at the end of the month, end of the week, end of the day. You know,
And either they're
versus
overcharging or they're losing money or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. Yeah.
also on the other side of things is when you yourself have that and you're monitoring that directly, you can check for leakages, you can check for power outages, you can check
Hmm.
for suboptimal production.
Hmm.
I'm not scanning as many units coming out of this particular part of the factory. What's going on? Okay, you find out that the conveyor belt is maybe turning a little bit slower, or uh, they're one staff member short, or they're taking too many breaks, and so you got to crack the whip.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Right. 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 Right.
but it's, yeah, the data is important because it helps drive efficiencies. We're getting hyper competitive now, and the more competitive you get, the more efficient you have to be on top of
Hmm.
whatever value proposition it is that you're delivering. So
Okay.
4R plays a big part of that.
So I want to move into a couple of things that we've talked about previously. One of which is that, well, actually, maybe it's a good place to start. If you could just give us a couple of examples, you can name the company or not name the company, it doesn't matter to me, from your portfolio or from companies you're very closely familiar with that you think typify this in Africa, and kind of describe what they do and why you think it's so interesting. Just a couple
Okay.
examples.
I'll get a couple, so two, couple is
Mhm.
two.
Yeah, that's
So
my usual understanding of a couple.
one is just, and I'm going to say this now just so you can remind me. One is with connected homes, and the other one is with medical diagnostics. Okay,
Okay.
so I'll start with connected homes. So we've got a company in the portfolio, as an example, called Sensor Networks, and
Mhm.
that company um, has the ability to say what's happening with your geyser. That's your hot water cylinder if you're not from South Africa. What's
Okay, now I know.
Okay, so what's happening with your hot water cylinder when you're not around? So if
Mhm.
there's an electrical surge, if there's a leak, it automatically detects that, right? It
Mhm.
automatically shuts down electricity and water flows um, to that particular unit, automatically notifies your insurer, automatically allocates a plumber, and you get a phone call from the plumber saying, "Listen, there's been an incident. I'm on my way."
So that's an
So
real IoT play, right? Is
that's
that
a real
sort of? Yeah.
IoT, fourth industrial revolution,
Okay.
in my eye, in my view, um, and
Mhm.
really transforming the way people do business. Plumbers not having to fill out as many paperwork, insurers, very easily just being able to manage the process. You as the end customer knowing that you don't have to worry about your goods being damaged, filing out too much paperwork as
Mhm.
a result. And but on top of that, what they're also able to do is, because it's a connected technology, they've got a platform where they can actually measure how much energy is being consumed, how hot your geyser is. So you can actually put it on a schedule. So in South Africa, we've got load shedding as an example.
Right.
Right?
I was
We
about to
don't
ask
know
about
when the
that.
power is going to go out. Actually, we do.
Mhm.
Our government is pretty
Yeah.
good at telling us when the power is going to go out. But
Yeah.
so there are these schedules that people are on, and you want to come home and you want to have hot water, right? So
Right.
you don't want this thing to be off. So this thing is actually timed to you can set it to automatically respond to load shedding to be able to heat your geyser up to a particular temperature, so that when you hit a certain stage of load shedding, you can still have warm water, right? So
Okay. So that's what makes this compelling in South Africa, right?
yeah,
Is that what
yeah,
makes it? That's the selling proposition of this, I would imagine,
yeah.
or a strong one.
and and it's not just the same. It's not just in South Africa. You know, you've got load shedding and other. We're just very
Right.
vocal. We like to advertise.
Right. Yeah. Everyone hears about it in South Africa, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's a much bigger problem than just South Africa, right?
Okay. No, fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough. It's about having what you need when the power goes off. It's
exactly.
that's one part of it. What's one part of it, and
Another
then
part,
using it more efficiently, and then having the
exactly.
maintenance sort of it's it keeps the thing from breaking down because the maintenance schedule is being maintained.
But let's not forget
Yeah.
about cost savings that you come about as a
Right.
result. So you
Oh,
can
it's
manage
much
when and how, and so your energy
much
costs.
cheaper to clean it on time than to repair it or replace it, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever that the process would be, the comparable process. Okay, that's really interesting. Now you mentioned medical diagnostics. Tell us about that one.
Cool. So we've got a company in the portfolio called AI Diagnostics, right? And this one
Okay.
is very interesting because it also speaks to Sensor Networks at the moment. We're speaking to an infrastructure play, an
Hmm.
infrastructure gap, a problem that we have. Let's rather put it that way. AI Diagnostics speaks to both infrastructure and a distribution of skills issue that we have on this continent, right?
Hmm.
So there are only so many radiologists. If you are in an urban hub, and this is true for South Africa, but also outside of South Africa on this continent, if you're in an
Hmm.
urban hub and you're receiving private healthcare, you're probably going to have access to a radiologist when you need it. The people who diagnose tuberculosis, those specialists, all of those
Hmm.
things when you need them, right? Um, Problem is, if you're in public, or if you're in a rural area, or in a more underdeveloped market in general, you're not going to
Hmm.
have as many highly skilled specialists, who are able to help with diagnosis and those sorts of things, right? And you're also
Right.
not going to have maybe the lab infrastructure to do high volumes of testing of cultures and things for diagnosis.
Hmm.
So AI diagnostics is very interesting because they've got a stethoscope, right? And
Hmm.
they've used AI to listen in on what's happening as you breathe to determine whether or not you've actually got tuberculosis and whether you should be referred for treatment,
Okay.
or for further diagnosis, whatever the case is. Um, so what that actually does is in certain areas, where people don't have access to that and they've got to wait every 3 weeks to a month, or they've got to travel to the big city or whatever the case is to be able to get an assessment, and traveling just is just it's a non-starter in some of these areas. It
Right.
becomes
Unless it's a very short distance. Right? Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Even that is hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So it becomes a
Hmm.
life-threatening scenario. Um,
Right.
but if you've got a stethoscope that
Right.
anybody in the clinic can just put on your chest
Right.
and you breathe into, and that immediately tells you whether you've got a situation or not. Now you've got life-saving technology as a result of the fourth industrial
Right.
revolution that addresses a critical infrastructure and skills gap on the continent.
So in this scenario, instead of
Mm,
building a hospital in a rural area, you just need some place where somebody can go where there's a few instruments, right?
thank you.
That's connected with it.
Exactly. So what you're actually going to see, so you'll see 4IR now starting to shape industries, right? So
Hmm.
you'll start seeing what I think is starting, because I've spoken to a few founders now, in South Africa and across the continent, who are actually using connected technologies, to assist people because of this infrastructure play. And so now what you're starting to see is a new sort of level of innovation around how people set up private care, how people also set up public care.
Okay.
So now you can have multiple centers of excellence based on connected technologies that can now
Okay. So
service.
it's really scales access to healthcare in
Yeah,
underserved areas, essentially, or
yeah,
has the potential to at least, right?
exactly, exactly.
Okay. That's really interesting. Okay.
Mm.
So, which lead you've sort of been answering this question all along in these two
Okay.
examples, but I want you to sort of summarize it a little bit as we wrap up. Um, why is fourth IR? And to be honest, my takeaway from this conversation is that the term fourth IR is a little almost too broad for what you're describing, but you can correct me there. Um, but let's talk about something we have talked about off camera a few times, which is why is, sort of summarize, why is this so important for the continent? Because you've sort of given a great example just now with diagnostics and a pretty good example with the geezers. And, but kind of wrap up why you're so excited about this for the continent, for all the challenges the continent has.
It's precisely because of the challenges, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's something that's needed, right? There's a lot of need
Yeah.
on this continent, um, and it's not being addressed. And 4IR literally gives us the ability to do so, to
Hmm.
address needs. The other thing that's quite interesting is that 4IR. So, as an example, there are companies now uh, telling suppliers, telling retailers and the suppliers exactly what's on the shelf, what's off the shelf right now, and what's been moved around the store, what's out, what's left the store, what's been purchased and it's gone.
Hmm.
So what that does is it actually enables suppliers to say, okay, this is moving really fast. We're running out now. The shipment from China is only coming in so many days, but we've also got a reasonable level of local manufacturing capacity, which may not be as competitive as what we've seen overseas, but it allows us to at least fulfill some level of order now. So we can keep
Okay.
manufacturing. So one of the things that 4IR is also addressing is the ability to build local manufacturing capacity. Sure, it may not be at the same level as what China's doing, other
Right.
countries in the East, but you're now
But it
starting to
fills
see
these
us.
supply gaps, for example, right?
Exactly. We're starting to
Mhm.
build industries now, and that's what's really exciting about 4IR. So having being able to say, well, AI says this is happening in the macro, so we need to stock up on this.
Mhm.
In this land of opportunity, so it allows you to just execute better, faster, more efficiently. In some cases, retailers, you know, origin is number two, so that's
Mhm.
origin, that's source of goods sold,
Right.
but reliability of supply is number one.
Right.
So just in order, so if you have I mean, fast fashion is a nice example of that, you know
Okay.
um, so you look at, say, Mr. Price, who's been really committing. I think it was Mr. Price, to local manufacturing of attire,
Right.
and um, they committed to fast fashion, and they can't wait for the season to be over and then things arrive, and we way too delayed. They see what's happening, they see what really works, and they've got this local supply chain that just executes on that,
Okay.
and they can
Okay.
see what's moving in real time based on the technologies that they've implemented. So
Okay. So what sounds like, yeah, what's kind of interesting about this is not just the startups that, whether it's diagnostics or manufacturing or whatever it is, that it's the spin-off businesses that sort of
yes,
are created as a result. That's
yeah.
what seems really interesting about a lot of this.
Yeah. So I mean, it's spin-off businesses. Sensor Networks again, right? They
Right.
started off with a plumbing network.
Hmm.
That plumbing network exploded because all of the people
Right.
working for these various plumbers said, "Wow, I can actually just build a business just working with sensor networks," and so
Right.
created new sort of plumbing companies, whatever those types of firms are called, and so it's been an enabler of that. Like you have all these spin-off companies just growing and
Right.
going.
Because the original company is creating a new, I don't want to say new industry because that's a bit much, but like the healthcare example was creating a new way to create infrastructure to
I
address
think it's about it's
healthcare
about
need. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
about
Go
growing
ahead.
industry, right? It's
Yeah.
about growing industry, and every new type of offering that gets brought to the table has a knock-on effect,
Right.
especially when you're
Right.
growing industries. So you don't just grow the healthcare people. Now there's more services required in those areas to be able to clean, to be able
Hmm.
to manage the infrastructure, to be able to, so now you've got more opportunities coming up because people can more affordably pop up new centers of excellence, to serve particular
Hmm.
areas.
Hmm.
So there's a lot that happens around 4IR, and that's, I think, the beauty of it, and why I actually love the idea of investing in that for this continent, because um, you can invest now because of the gaps and have exponential returns because there's it's just an open playing field.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you can't ignore the impact that you create as a result of these companies doing phenomenally well on the continent.
Okay. That's a really excellent point to end it on. Yet I still have one more question. um, and a little bit kind of panning back. Um, we've, you're an investor in Africa, and last year was, kind of a pullback year in terms of businesses getting funded and so on and so forth. Fourth IR notwithstanding, what do you think this year looks like? Just as if I'm a founder in Africa,
Is
should I
this
be pessimistic,
mhm.
optimistic? How should I reorient how I think if I think I'm going to need to raise money this year?
Is this in or beyond 4IR?
Just beyond, that's just broadly
Okay,
speaking.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting one. We have debates about this all the time within sort of
I
the
bet you
VC
do.
community. Um,
Yeah.
my opinion, what I've seen from speaking to people, is that the last 2 years, there was a lot of caution that started creeping in, which accelerated last year
Hmm.
into the deal making process,
Hmm.
and a lot of investors actually hung back to say, okay, let's see what happens with the market, or let's be a little bit more cautious about where we put our capital. Let's also see what happens in the portfolio. Do companies need additional bridging capital to be able to make it through the funding winter, and
Hmm.
that sort of thing. And what's happened is there's actually just been a buildup of like an excess of dry powder. So that's money that needs to be spent, but that hasn't been spent by a fund
Right.
manager. Fund
Right.
managers are on the clock. The day
Right.
you close, you first close your fund, you're on the clock with a deployment period, right? And if you haven't really been deploying over the last 2 years, and your fund was already 2 years in, you've got 1 year left. So com- uh, fund managers are now under quite a bit of pressure, and the price is right now. So
Valuations are no longer as
exactly. So
rich.
I
Yeah.
I think if you're a founder raising now and you research your VC well, you might actually be able to raise quite well. But it really does depend on who you're speaking to and what your
Hmm.
offering is and how it aligns with what they're doing, right? So if you track your VCs and you see who started raising, or who announced their funds 2 to 3 years ago,
Hmm.
and how many deals they've announced, then you'll have a pretty good idea of who you should go
Who
to, who's
needs a
going to
few
be under
deals?
pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it depends. A lot of startups, you know, are probably going to struggle. Everybody's still going to be increasingly looking for traction, and high and really good sort of positive unit economics and high performance
Right.
data before they invest in companies. But I think we're going to see a high volume of capital being deployed
Right.
from.
So the stage at which your business needs to be in order to effectively raise, that bar has been raised a little bit over the last couple of years. Is that fair to
Oh, for
say?
sure. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That's
Um, everybody's looking. There are very few people. or VCs still investing um, without commercial markers,
There's no
because
idea
right.
investing anymore, right?
Well, there is, but I would say that bucket has shrunk,
Right.
and people, or if
Considerably, I would imagine.
people are a bit more cautious about that particular bucket. Let me put it that way,
Okay.
because you really need things to perform right now, right? So
Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to hear a lot more from you about all of these things at the conference, and we're really excited about that. And really thank you for joining us today on the podcast here. Appreciate it.
no, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to see what happens at the BigFive Summit, BigFive Digital Summit. Last year was quite interesting. I loved the fact that there was lots of senior leadership from corporate showing up, and actually participating, not just showing up. That was great
That's the
to
important
see.
difference, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely looking forward to it and hoping to share more and learn more at the conference. So
All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
okay, thanks, Charles.
Thanks for joining the Big 5D Podcast Summit Speaker Series, featuring conversations about issues important to SMEs in Africa with the thought leaders slated to appear at the 2024 Big 5 Summit in Cape Town. This episode was brought to you by the Big 5 Summit, Africa's leading small business technology event, which takes place 19-20 March in Cape Town. To get involved with this event, please write to us at info@big5digital.org. This podcast is a production of Big 5 Digital and is hosted and produced by me, Charles Laughlin, Editor-in-Chief of Big 5 Digital. Thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned for more great episodes.